Excellent. All right then. So, this is just capturing audio. So quickly, let's recap. Last class, we did a lot of talking about John Locke, this guy, right? And you read the letter concerning toleration. Very quickly, what was the main point of that document that we talked about at length last class? The main point. Yeah? Go ahead. Zuleika.
Oh, I'm sorry. That church and government should be separate.
Church and government should be separate. You know, we never asked the why. What was the reason that John Locke thought you have to keep church and government separate? What happens if a government starts enforcing one type of religious belief? What had been happening so far? Civil war, persecutions, problems, internal division, international war, right? Chaos. And John Locke's, like all the philosophers of his time, we looked at Copernicus, we looked at Galileo, we looked at Francis Bacon, we looked at Isaac Newton, and ultimately we ended up with John Locke. All these guys had one thing in mind, which was, what have we been doing so far in the field of science, politics, religion? Is it working? No. Then why are we still doing it? Are we simply doing the same thing because we're afraid of asking new questions? Yes. Well, then why would we do that? All right? And so, at the same time that Martin Luther was challenging the authority of the Pope as the head of all Christianity and saying, I believe you've interpreted the Bible incorrectly, and thus was born Protestantism. At that exact same time, the early 1500s, Nicholas Copernicus has the courage to challenge the church-accepted view of astronomy, the position of the sun and the earth to each other, and the moon and the stars. And he says, well, what does he say? What does Nicholas Copernicus say? Go ahead. That the church-accepted view is wrong. But what was the church-accepted view? I'm going to go shopping. Go.
The sun was the center of the universe.
He said that. But what did the church believe? Go. Right. Which made sense. Right. Because why would, if you are a member of the Christian church and you believe in God and the biblical story of creation, why would God create man in his own image and then not make the earth the center of everything? It didn't make any sense. But Copernicus looked at the stars, he read the books, and he theorized, and he decided this doesn't make any real sense. He published his book basically on the year of his death. Galileo came along and proved Copernicus using what? A telescope. At which point nobody could argue with him because you don't like the theory? Well, look for yourself. This is not personal prejudice. Look at the theory and you're good to go. Galileo also said one further thing which really was revolutionary. He said something that humans are capable of understanding what? The natural universe, the mathematical world, God's entire creation is no longer a mystery. If humans are allowed the freedom to try, to test everything, experiment with everything, if humans are allowed intellectual freedom, they will find out how everything works. And, well, Galileo made that proposition. Isaac Newton proved that Galileo was right, because Newton discovered what? The theory of what? Gravity. All of a sudden, he had the workings of why does the sun, the earth, the moon, apples falling from the tree, why does that happen as it does? Before it was, I don't know, that's the way God wants it. Now it's a mathematical equation that everybody knows, it's published, it's testable, and it stood the test of time. So if you can understand the workings of the universe, there's no stopping you. Let's try curing diseases. In part of your readings, it refers to the agricultural revolution, growing more food on the same plot of land to feed an expanding population. How did that happen? The same thing. Trial and error. Try anything. What did they try? They tried putting cow and horse manure into the ground. And what do they discover? It replenishes the soil. We grow more food using these techniques. Let's keep going. Your readings are also referring to the Industrial Revolution. What was the problem? Growing population needs inexpensive clothing made of cotton. pen manufacturing doesn't work as well. So invent machines. They did. Industrial Revolution. What is being released this week in the stores? iPhone 6, as well as the new operating system, iOS 8, which I didn't realize I was that far behind. But it is now, you can see that after the Industrial Revolution, one development leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, and it's not taking 15, 20, 100 years. It's taking 12 months for the next big jump in technology, right? This is the consequence of the Industrial Revolution, but also the intellectual freedom that the Scientific Revolution said humans deserve so that they can improve their quality of life right now. Now, I use the iPhone example as an easy example because everybody knows the iPhone, right? And you might say, well, how does that really improve the quality of life? The development of the iPhone is no different than the development of the first the flying shuttle, which helped industrialize the production of cotton. It improved the quality of life because it increased productivity. And so the cost of a product went down. And you might say, well, how does an iPhone increase productivity and make my quality of life better? Well, think about the things you do on your iPhone now that you're no longer sitting in front of a desktop doing. Texting, emails, Facebook updates, web pages, calendar updates. I only bought an iPhone because I realized I had so many needs, I couldn't write everything down. And then once you actually have the product, what do? You explore and you find other things to do with it. Just like in the Industrial Revolution. We have machines, but they're powered by foot pedal and hand crank. But people get tired. What do? We invent the steam engine. Well, if you invent the steam engine for cotton manufacturers, couldn't you use it for anything else? Yes, you can. One industry leads to another, leads to another. Everyone is free to develop their ideas into reality, whether it's Nicholas Copernicus, Galileo, or Eli Whitney, who created the cotton gin, which perfected the cleaning of cotton from its seeds, and then it's sent off to the weavers that turn it into fabric, the spinners who turn it into thread. So what does all this have to do? This is the Scientific Revolution. Oh, who remembers the guy who posited the theory of empiricism? You remember his name? Francis Bacon. And what is the theory of empiricism? Yeah? Yes. Test everything, because if it doesn't work, if it doesn't produce the most good for the most people, no reason to keep it. So what happens to tradition and authority if the new theory is test everything? Yeah. Before you're taught, listen to your elders. That is the primary goal of society, respect, authority, and hierarchy. But Bacon, Galileo, Copernicus, John Locke, these guys are theorizing a new system of thinking, a modern system of thinking, where it's all about how do you improve the individual's quality of life now, not in the afterlife. Because according to church doctrine, remember the absolute divine right monarchy? You obey the king no matter what he says, because he's a servant of God, and when you die, you'll go to heaven and you'll receive your rewards, etc. The scientists of the Scientific Revolution, the philosophers of the Enlightenment that I'm going to talk about today, their response was, why wait? If we know how to grow more food now to feed more people and increase their quality of life, why would we continue letting them suffer? If we can increase the efficiency of surgery and medicine, why wouldn't we do that now? If we can get products from the factory to the market quicker, at lower cost, pass those costs on to consumers who use that surplus money to buy more food, better clothing, invest in their future, why wouldn't we do that now? So you have the matching of capitalism with this intellectual freedom, and you have basically the iPhone 6 that comes out, 2 minutes after the iPhone 5S, right? Or the 5C with all its color. That was an interesting innovation. But how does this take us to John Locke? John Locke was essentially the granddaddy of everything. He was the bridge from, and this is John Locke. Nice, simple guy with lots of ideas. John Locke was the bridge from the scientific revolution, where advances were made in science, astronomy, biology, etc., where questions were asked where before nobody asked any questions. They accepted theories passed down from them for hundreds of years. Those types of questions of, does it work? Not really. Well, why don't we try something new? Now they're being asked about everything else, not just science, but church-state relations, education policy, prison reform. Do we have it? No. Why not? Etc., etc., etc. So, if Newton brought us the idea that science is a product of rational observation, meaning science is experimentation. You go where the experiment leads you. You observe, and then you determine what the next step is. You don't stop because you're afraid of what the answers might be or who might be offended. Locke took that basic understanding from Isaac Newton, that everything has to hold up to rational observation. Everything has got to earn its place. And he applied it to philosophy and how we view ourselves in society, how we view with our values, our life, etc. And why was it John Locke? He's an Englishman. He's writing at the time of the Glorious Revolution, 1688, when James II was kicked off the throne because he was too absolute a monarch that did not support the rights of the common people. And remember, the English threw out James II. They brought in a new king and forced him and his queen to sign what document? The English Bill of Rights, which legally limited the absolute power of the king. It also promised religious toleration for all Protestants and stopped the killing of Catholics, which was a big deal. It allowed for the freedom of elections, no cruel and unnecessary punishment, no unusual bail, all these things you already know, because that was going to produce a stable society, which would lead for advancements in the future, and no more wars. Locke's ideas spread like wildfire. People were looking for an answer to divine right monarchy. They were looking for an answer to that stuff by Jacques-Bonin Bossuet that says you're not allowed to ask any questions. God chooses the king. End of story. If you're innocent, you don't have to worry about anything. If you're not innocent, then you're in trouble. People were looking for a response to that that would make sense to their Christian subjects, allies, friends, and enemies. Because how do you argue against, this is what God wants? You have to come up with a counter-argument. And the counter-argument for Locke was, what gets passed down isn't always necessarily true. It's just what people are comfortable with. So, and this idea allowed people to challenge authority everywhere. Everywhere. There is no Declaration of Independence without John Locke. There is no French Revolution without John Locke. There is no women's rights. There is no rights for the non-majority without John Locke. Because he made it okay to challenge the status quo and say, that's not working for me. There is no civil rights with John Locke. And by civil rights, I mean all civil rights. Race, class, gender, sexuality, all of it. All of that is rooted in the idea that you are entitled to push back at the majority if you simply feel that the way people live or accept what's quote-unquote normal, it doesn't work for you. You're entitled to push back because you're a member of that society. It all starts with John Locke. That's unexpected. All right. John Locke's, one of his first major essays, the one that you read, Kim, a year earlier, an essay concerning human understanding. This was a huge deal and really pushed forward the Enlightenment. The thinking. One of the reasons why people were afraid to challenge the church, the state authorities, was that they were afraid of what to do with that freedom. How many of you are familiar with the biblical story of creation? The Christian biblical story of creation. Okay. In a nutshell, according to many Christians, as written in the Bible, okay, that's fine. At the beginning of time, God created the earth. He created man, Adam in this case, in his own image. From him, took the root, created Eve, Garden of Eden, gave them everything they wanted and said, just don't do one thing. Do not eat the apple from the tree of knowledge. Satan appeared in the form of a snake, tempted Eve to eat the apple. She did. Convinced Adam to do so. God found out. He was very angry, and he cast them out of the Garden of Eden. From this story, which some people believe, some people don't, the idea developed that humans, if given individual choice, will simply choose to sit and do what's wrong for them, which will lead to self-destruction. And thus, you have this belief you need strong government. You need a strong church with very specific rules about what you eat, when you eat, who you marry, how you behave, what type of job you have, what you can read. Because otherwise, human free will will lead you to sin, because you were born with original sin. The human founders, Adam and Eve, they sinned, and that curse was on all of their descendants. That's the biblical story. Now, whether you believe it or not, or you think it's crap or not, it doesn't matter. This is Christian Europe, and that's what they believe. And that gives the power to the churches and to the governments they're allied with. So, what does Locke come back and say? He says, well, that's just not true. There's no proof for that. There's absolutely no proof. Here's what I know, based on rational observation. Babies are born neither evil, nor smart, nor wholesome. They're born ignorant. And humans develop characteristics by the way they're raised. Humans are born with a blank slate, and upon that blank slate we write human nature, and thus an essay concerning human nature. But what about the argument that some people are just naturally bad? Well, maybe some people are naturally bad, but if caught early enough, they could be less bad, I guess, would be the counter-argument. So, if you reject the notion that humans are prone to evil, then you must accept that humans must have the freedom to choose their own destiny. And if so, what human would rationally choose to make their life harder? Why wouldn't they make choices to improve their quality of life? And we've been doing so for hundreds and thousands of years. That was Locke's argument. Why would you invent fire except to cook your food and keep you warm? Why would you invent the wheel except for making transportation more efficient? And language, and religion, and so on and so on. All these things were invented by humans to improve our quality of life, which means the scientists, the biologists, and now the philosophers should be allowed to take their ideas wherever they take them, because their goal is to improve the quality of life. But he also had another great counter-argument. And I'm going to ask you this question. What is the difference between an idea that lasts forever and an idea that is dismissed as just the ravings of a crazy person? What determines if an idea lasts forever and has value, or is forgotten as just the misplaced idealism of one crazy, quote-unquote, crazy person? Yes, and then over there. For the idea?
Yeah, for the idea.
Okay, what else? Evidence would be nice to help establish support, but many ideas work because they hit you emotionally, right? Nowadays, we want more evidence. Go ahead. Yes, but how many people don't even believe in the theory of evolution, in spite of the science? Why? Because emotionally, they can't stomach the idea that God has nothing to do with why we're here, right? That's a rational choice to ignore the science.
That's like a heretical, that might be like heretical.
It is heretical, but this is America. Everybody gets to have their own ideas as long as we don't force them on other people, right? And that's the way it should be, my opinion. But you all are right. Ideas, the difference between a good idea and a crazy person's ideas is just the amount of followers. that's hard to stomach. You mean there's no such thing as a really good idea and then an idea that's just bad? When Jesus Christ was first preaching Christianity, he had a small group of followers, most of which were killed by the Romans. Until there were so many of them that the Roman Empire became officially Christian, and then they started persecuting everybody else. Right? The theory of evolution, when first created, offended a lot of people. It offends a lot of people now, but the vast majority of people now believe that that's where humans came from. Copernicus's idea, when it was first invented or published, offended a lot of people on religious grounds, and maybe scientific. But over time, they said, yeah, that makes sense. Time and support determines a good idea from a bad idea. And John Locke's point was, why are you afraid of ideas? Let anybody do and say whatever they want. Human beings will naturally filter out the crazy and eventually stick with what works. You, the church, you, the absolute king, don't have to tell them what to think. They'll figure it out. We've been doing it for thousands of years. And if you give them the freedom to think, they're not going to destroy themselves. You will increase the development of new ideas and technologies. Yes?
Would you say John Locke and other philosophers of this era were atheists?
No, they were all Christians. All of them were Christians. Atheism doesn't happen until the late 19th century, when science has so taken over thinking that people are comfortable saying, if you can't prove the existence of heaven, I don't believe it. Because everything else is provable by science. Everything else. We've proven everything. John Locke was a strong Christian. Galileo, Copernicus, even Voltaire, who I'll talk about in a second, was a Christian. But all of them believed we've been mixing religion and politics for thousands of years, and what have we ended up with? A lot of dead people. We have tried to enforce one religion for hundreds of thousands of years, and all we've done is upset people and kill them. The Crusades went to Jerusalem and the holy cities to stamp out Islam. What they do? They killed a bunch of Muslims, but they're still Islam. There have been persecutions of Christians in ancient Roman history. What happened? The Christians didn't disappear. Now, some religions have disappeared over time, partly from persecution and partly because other more influential religions take over. And over time, religion becomes less central to people's lives. So, what you read for me, the letter concerning toleration, it's based on these principles of an individual is responsible for their own salvation. They choose what church to belong to because they agree with the principles of that church and they put them into practice. And governments cannot determine what religion is, quote unquote, better. The only thing a government does is protect your property, what's on earth, not souls. And thus the separation of church and state. So, if Locke believes, oh dear, look at that, we're actually finished. Excellent. So now we get to the next one, which takes us to that one. Slideshow from the beginning. Okay. If Locke believes the individual has a right to determine what religion they choose to belong to, because they've made an open-minded, rational, thinking choice, I want to be Catholic, not Protestant, Jewish, not Muslim, Hindu, not Sikh, whatever the case may be, that's their right, because no individual would rationally give up control of their soul to some guy, king, queen, whatever. And that being the case, if you can't force people what to believe in, but truly believe, right? Locke says you can't force people to truly believe something. You can force people to fake it. But why would you want to fake true belief? And this goes to Nathaniel, right? Are you Nathaniel or Kenneth? Kenneth. This goes to Kenneth's point. Were these people atheists? No. Locke says, if you want to have religion, you need to have real religion, not people faking belief. And you can't force them to believe like truly deeply. And since you can't do that, don't bother trying. Let them believe what they want. You'll have less wars. Now, if you believe that you make an individual choice about what faith that you want to belong to because you're determining how best your soul is served, then you can imagine that people are going to feel pretty comfortable asking the big questions about everything else. If you're comfortable making decisions about the salvation of your soul, you're going to feel a little bit less pressure questioning monarchy, questioning the prison system, questioning, hell, I don't know, is this literature truly immoral and indecent or not? Because after you've made the decision that it's okay, that you have control over your soul, everything else is just kind of unimportant. Right? So, starts off with politics. This now, once you go from challenging tradition in science, math, biology, you try anything new based on rational thinking, and you go into philosophy, politics, religion, prison reform, whatever, then you go from the scientific revolution into the Enlightenment. And that's when all of these things are challenged. When these things are challenged, that's when you're bringing rational, critical thinking outside of the realm of science into the realm of society. So what is the Enlightenment? It's pretty straightforward. First off, rationality. Look at your society. How's it organized? Is it working? Well, what defines working? If you ask the rich and the powerful, they say things are working. But increasingly, people are not looking to see what the rich and powerful want. They're looking around and saying, this is how we organize our society. And we have frequent uprisings of the poor because they're hungry and depressed, which is bad for everybody. Clearly, this system of organization is not rational because it leads to more and more problems down the line. We have a system of prisons, which don't actually help society, they just make prisoners, which then turns them into criminals when you put, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Soft criminals next to hardened criminals. I'll get to that in a moment. An economic system. Does it work? Well, we have a lot of rich people. Yes, but now people are asking, what about the rest of society? What about all those other poor people? Is there a way to maybe have less poor people and maybe not take money away from the rich? Why don't we ask the question? Right? And so on and so on and so on. So, the guys who led the charge to question everything were the philosophes, the French word for philosophers. Why do we call them philosophes? Because most of the great ones came from France. There were philosophers, Germany, England, Scotland, Italy, Spain, some Russians, Prussians, but the big ones, the ones that you might sound familiar to you, are from France. And thus they get to call the whole group of them in their own language. They are against anything that has shown itself to take away individual rights, whether it's political repression, absolute monarchy, military dictatorships, etc., religious persecution, trying to enforce one religion and executing the others, or social inequality, mass poverty in a world of economic plenty. These are all things the philosophes felt it's time to fix. Why do you think so? Why do you think they felt entitled to now fight on behalf of society? What do you think gave them that entitlement? Why do you think? Before, nobody would ever bring up these questions. Why do you think they're entitled now? Yeah?
They might have been influenced by what they saw happening in England, the Glorious Revolution.
All right, so there was this idea of challenging authority, which then leads to challenging authority in other fields. What else? Why do you think they felt entitled, confident, to actually suggest a new system of government, economics, church, state, religion? Yeah? Increasingly, they had more and more people paying attention because everybody was thinking along these reform lines. What else? Why do you think they felt entitled, confident to try anything new? Hang on a second, Emmanuel. Sorry? That it was inefficient, not inefficient, it was, it persecuted a lot of people, right? But why the concern for the poor, the politically persecuted, the ignorant, prisoners? Why all of a sudden the concern with the other? Those that have been forgotten by everybody else. Because remember what I said, you don't get to women's rights, gay rights, civil rights, any rights, without people saying, how do we improve society? And before, society was, what the people up top tell you to do is the beginning and end of story. If you don't like it, you'll be happy, you'll be fine in heaven. But for now, suck it up. But now it's, what you're doing up top, if it doesn't benefit as many people at the bottom as possible, then you're simply wrong. What makes you think they got to that point where what happens in the broad society is their priority?
Equality. They want equality in everyone.
They're going towards this idea of equality, right? Why do you think? Why do you think, though, all of a sudden, what's good for all of society is the primary goal of new ideas? Yeah?
You have the idea that everybody's born with certain natural rights. Don't you have to aren't you inclined to start respecting those rights? And then start thinking about people who may be, as you say, forgotten or oppressed?
Yes. Let's go backwards to John Locke. He argued everybody was born with a blank slate, right? If everybody is born with a blank slate, what does that make everybody at birth? Equal. And divisions are manufactured by society. Now, those divisions are needed. Some people have to lead, some people have to follow, and that proves itself to be functioning. For instance, you put the guy in charge of the army who actually has military experience. That makes sense. But do you promote people to general just because of the brother of the guy of the thing who knows the king, and then he gets a bunch of people killed on the battlefield? That doesn't make sense. So if everyone's born equal at the beginning of time, and divisions and hierarchy have to be based in rationality, because they're needed and useful, we do that because these things are developed for the community that is at its root equal at birth. So, let's start off with John Locke. Locke's big contribution to modern thinking is two treatises on government, a fairly large book, 1689, the same year that he did the letter concerning toleration, 1 year after the Glorious Revolution, but the same year that the English Bill of Rights was passed into law. The two treatises on government justifies the people's right to rise up, throw out their king that's behaving badly and is taking away their rights, and choose a new government. Because remember, divine right monarchy says you cannot challenge the king. John Locke was living at a time when the king was thrown out and they hired a new one. What's the justification? He came up with it. And the argument was quite simple. At the beginning of time, just like everyone is born ignorant and on a clean slate, they're also born with natural rights. Do I have them up there? No, I don't. What are natural rights? What do you think people are born with at the beginning of time, before all systems of government, language, religion, organization? What does everybody have a right to? Their life. Nobody would give up. Their liberty and property. Life, liberty, and the enjoyment of your property. Meaning, if you go out and hunt that elk, then you've earned it. It's yours. No one has a right to it. Life, liberty, and your property. In our Declaration of Independence, we have life, liberty, and what? Does anybody know? Nope. Pursuit of happiness. Does anybody know why we switched out property for pursuit of happiness? Everybody has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We were in slavery at that time, but that's not it. You're getting close, though. What's the difference between the right to life, liberty, and property, and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Think about it for a second.
No government.
Go ahead, Richard.
The government's entitled to take the happiness of somebody else away.
Yes, but why property versus, why pursuit of happiness as the words instead of property? Emmanuel?
I would say that
absolutely true. But again, why those words, pursuit of happiness, instead of the right to property as one of your basic rights that government must protect?
Because property can be anything, can be bad property.
Well,
We're getting close. They didn't care.
But your pursuit of happiness doesn't necessarily have to be property, does it? I mean, I don't know.
Does everybody have property?
No.
It's
And not everybody's going to get property either.
Right.
But that doesn't say they're not going to pursue their happiness.
So that's the point, right? You're writing a universal document that tries to appeal to all people for all time. Not everyone's going to have property, but everyone's going to want to be happier. You have a right to the pursuit of happiness free of all obstacles. That applies to everybody. That's why these documents still survive, and no one just dismisses it as, wasn't it written by a slaveholder? Yes, it was. But he wrote it in a universal language which people would look at later on and say, that's actually pretty good. Let me use that. Right? So, the natural rights you're born with, according to John Locke, is life, liberty, and the enjoyment of your property. And he argues this by rationality. Before there was any governments and rules and laws, everybody had their life, everybody had their freedom, because they had no rules they had to obey, and they got to enjoy whatever property they built with their hands or captured with their hands. So if that's the case, if people are born with complete freedom to do whatever they wanted, then why did people come together and form government with laws? Why do you think?
Because they don't want people to be creating things that actually force all the people,
Yeah, you're right.
hurts all the people.
Exactly. Yes, a society of individuals defending themselves is chaos. But a society that binds together, accumulates their resources, works together, and gives up a little bit of their complete freedom to enjoy the benefits of living together is a society that thrives. So his argument was, you know why we have government when before people were born completely without any rules? It's because it was hard to live that way. So they decided to give up a little bit of their freedom to live in a society with rules and laws and government and people working together. But they didn't give up their natural rights. They formed government to protect their natural rights. So if that's the case, if you accept that line of thinking, that people are born free and equal and a right to their property, and they create government to protect those natural rights, what are the people allowed to do if those rights are attacked by the government? Rebellion. Natural rights is the great counter-argument to divine right monarchy. Bossuet can argue God has chosen kings to look over his people. Locke says there is no proof of that. But we do know that at the beginning there was nothing, just human beings. And we created everything that we live by. And why do we do it? Because we wanted to improve our lives. Rational thinking. Next comes Baron Montesquieu, the next in the... Am I going to run out of time? I'm going to run out of time. All right. So let me push ahead to the juicy stuff. Montesquieu's fine, but I don't care about him. Let's move along. I like this guy. I like Rousseau. Rousseau was what was he? He was like the rock star of his time, where he could get away with anything, have a lot of illegitimate children, was abusive to his wives and his mistresses, and nobody cared because they dug what he was writing. Just like we allow our athletes and our musicians and not politicians, we crucify them regularly. But celebrities, we give them a wide berth. Charlie Sheen, Ray Rice, and not James Brown, though. James Brown got strung up by his heels. There's a new movie out on James Brown, which is by the same guy.
Chris Brown.
What?
He said Chris Brown.
Chris Brown.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't care about Chris Brown. He's the guy married to Rihanna, right?
Yeah.
I don't understand that marriage.
They're not married.
They're not married. Even better. I don't understand that relationship. I just don't understand it. But I don't ask any questions about people's personal lives because, well, tired, so I'm a little punchy. Let's talk about Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Rousseau was an interesting cat because he bought all of Locke's ideas and took them further. He did believe in the virtues of democracy. If the people are all equal and the people choose government, the people should be allowed to vote for the laws in which they live under. Democracy. But he didn't just want a democratic government where the majority rules, because that's what Locke would say. The majority rules, otherwise you have chaos. Rousseau wanted something else, a virtuous government, where the government would make good decisions for the people. Well, then now you're getting into good versus, like, I don't know, how the hell do you measure good versus bad? America has always run by majority rule, which is why we had slavery as long as we did. We interned the Japanese. We massacred Native Americans because the majority wanted it. How do we switch to not genocidal policies? The majority decided we didn't want it anymore. Right? That's how America works. What does that mean? It means we as a people have the right to make as many mistakes as we want, to take as many victims as we want, until we change our mind and we learn better. Rousseau is saying, why do we have to go through that? Why can't we just get some people to make the good decisions early and tell them, this is going to be fine, suck it up. For instance, taxes. Nobody likes taxes. So let's say we vote to abolish taxes, and then we have no government, no military, our society crumbles, our lights get turned off, and we're invaded by Canada and Mexico. At which point people realize we should have kept the taxes. And we ignore those people and we just keep the taxes. Now, Rousseau is saying, why don't we do that for all things? Why don't we make decisions that are good for society, even if the people themselves don't even know it's good for them? Okay, so the counter-argument is, well, how the hell do you make up good decisions? Well, Rousseau would say, where are we? Let's move to this. The social contract. That contract which binds people together to live under the rules of their government, right? If they agree to live under those rules, then they have to do whatever the government chooses as their laws. They can't just sort of say, no, I don't feel like obeying that law. If that's the case, you leave. But if you stay, you are forced to obey those laws. And according to Rousseau, you are quote-unquote forced to be free. Right? Let's think about that for a moment. What does that mean, forced to be free? Forced to be free. What does that mean to you? I know it sounds like a contradiction, but it's not, according to Rousseau. What does it mean to you, forced to be free?
To live your life as long as you're obeyed by our rules.
Yes, but our rules will lead to your quote-unquote freedom, greater liberty, a greater enjoyment of your life, is how freedom is defined here. Go.
They're giving our freedom with more control.
Yes, but it's good control. I know what you're thinking. How is there any good control? If any of you had any kids, you wouldn't allow your kids to eat whatever the hell they wanted. Right? That's good control. This class has an established curriculum. I have to teach certain things. You have to do certain things to get a grade, which is then transferable and respected at another college. Good control. Right? The police are allowed to arrest you, but they have to have cause and read you your rights. Most of the time. Good control. Right? So, that's what he's talking about. Well, then again, you're saying, well, then how the hell do we get to good control? Well, it all comes down to majority rule. Okay? Then here's where it gets a little dicey. According to Locke, what the people want is easy, the majority. Whether it's 51% or 99%, that's the majority, and the losing side of that debate has to suck it up, because they've chosen to live in that society. And if they lose the debate, that's too bad. They live by the new rules until the next round of debating and new laws. According to Rousseau, majority doesn't always lead to the best virtuous decision. And he's right. We had slavery in this country, legalized slavery until we fought a war to force the South to get rid of it. So he has a point. Problem is, though, this idea that you can make decisions without simply obeying the majority will of the people gets a little dicey. Because he would say, if you educate the people, if you give them every side to every argument, and you give them the complete freedom to make a decision, they will make the right decision. And that will be the general will of the people. Okay? But a lot of well-educated people have justified genocide, slavery, racism, discrimination, imprisonment, persecution, you name it. Right? The reason why people still read Rousseau is because he is the guy that legitimates dictatorship in the modern era. Louis XIV can be an absolute monarch because he says, I am God's servant. Adolf Hitler can be an absolute dictator, not because he says he's God's servant, it's because he says, I know what is good for the German people. And I will force you to be free. I will force you to be free by eliminating all those things which hinder your enjoyment of your greater German status. I will eliminate the chaos of the free press, the endless debates of Parliament, and the Jews that interfere with the purity of the German racial stock. Right? That all comes from Rousseau. The idea that if you have the power to impose your will on people, you can justify it by saying, I'm doing this for you, not for my own selfish interest, but for you. Every modern dictator has stayed in power because he has convinced the majority of those people that he is actually acting on their behalf, or at least he has convinced them not to rise up against him, because it would be worse without that dictator. Okay? Let me push ahead. Voltaire's fun. Voltaire was the only guy at his time who everybody just knew where he was all the time. You know how nowadays virtually every celebrity has got a Twitter feed, Facebook, whatever the case may be, Instagram, and usually they turn on the location monitor and you know where they are. Especially when they say, hey, I'm in New York, I'm getting a hot dog. Like, everybody knows where everybody is. Voltaire was that kind of celebrity before there was telephones, telegrams. Like, basically we were still operating on smoke signals and postal service. So you could address a letter, Dear Voltaire, in an envelope for Voltaire. And eventually it would get to him. Where was he generally living? On the border of France and Switzerland. Why? Because everything he published pissed somebody off. He was against absolute monarchy. He was against organized religion. Why? Because all of them persecuted somebody. And every once in a while, he had to flee France and go to Switzerland, an independent country, for freedom. So, he wrote a number of books like all these other guys, like Candide in 1759, a simple, small novel that was, it attacked superstition. Now, what's superstition? According to him, a lot of religion is superstition. There's no proof for it, and so you're just believing in a fantasy. Was he an atheist? No. But he was an enemy of organized religion. Well, what's the difference between organized religion and faith? Well, let me ask you that. What's the difference between organized religion and faith? Yeah?
Faith is just believing in whatever you believe in. You have
Mhm.
faith. Organized religion is like a commitment to specific following.
Exactly. Other people. One, difference between faith and organized religion. What do you think?
Faith is like what you believe on,
Right?
and organized religion is like
Can you have faith without organized religion? Yeah. Organized religion is the building, the scriptures, the customs, the vestments, and the punishment. Was that?
Concept is kind of like a business.
It is.
Organized.
Everything's a business. Nothing runs for free. So, Voltaire, his biggest problem was that Religion is good, God is good, everybody needs morality, but the way we have organized religion today, all it leads to is intolerance, death, and genocide, and persecution. And enough is enough. Did people listen to Voltaire? Because by that point, everybody was challenging everything. Voltaire and his fellow philosophers came up with the idea of deism. Deism is not atheism. It is the belief that there is a God, a belief that there is some form of higher power that created everything, universe, humans, the earth. But he doesn't control our day-to-day actions. Deism believes that God is a divine, quote-unquote, watchmaker. What does that mean? He made everything, flicked the switch, gave humans breath in their lungs, and then said, have at it. You have freedom of choice. You get to do what you want, good or bad. I'm staying out of it. This is the perfect marriage between faith and the scientific revolution. Faith gives you a God that created everything. The scientific revolution is based on the idea that God gave you free will to pretty much figure out how to make life easier on Earth. Now there's no more contradiction between faith and science. Of course, the problem is, if you start going down, and there is no proof that Catholicism is true and Protestantism is wrong, or Judaism is true and Hinduism is wrong. There is no proof. There's just what we've decided as humans. So let's not kill anybody in the process. Let God work that out in the afterlife. Of course, the problem is, if you open up the discussion that only what you can prove is what you can believe, eventually you end up with atheism, but that's another 150 years away. Adam Smith's fun. He revolutionized economics. And Adam Smith is really the granddaddy of modern capitalism. He looked around and said, capitalism works pretty well. It seems to produce a whole lot of money for a whole lot of people, but also produces a lot of poverty and imbalance. Why? His conclusion was this. Just like the scientists said, scientists must have intellectual freedom to go wherever their ideas take them, which eventually improves the quality of life because of the inventions they come up with. Just like John Locke says, people have the freedom to choose the government that works best for them and religion, and then they change if it doesn't work for them. Smith says you need freedom in the economic marketplace. What the hell does that mean? Freedom in the marketplace. Remember Louis XIV? Remember mercantilism, where the government controls every aspect of the economy? Adam Smith says this doesn't work. Capitalism, like intellectual freedom, needs space to breathe, trial, error, correct mistakes, expand. And the only laws that have proven what works the best is not government control, but the law of supply and demand, which only works if the economy is completely free, laissez-faire. French for leave it alone. No government regulation of the economy. Let the people's demand generate the supply, which is met by the manufacturers, and there will be a perfect balance of what the people need and what is produced by the economy. Now, Adam Smith wasn't a crazy person. He didn't believe that capitalism should lead to massive poverty. He did believe, though, that properly managed capitalism will produce so much wealth that it's going to benefit everybody, and then you'll take care of the extreme things with government policy. Modern-day conservative economists take Adam Smith and they tend to only look at what they like, which was government shouldn't interfere with the economy. And then they interpret it rather badly. But that's Adam Smith. Freedom in the marketplace. Freedom of individuals to choose what to buy, how much to buy. Supply, demand are the only two laws that work there. Where are we at? 143. What's left? prison reform. I'll do that next class, or the class after next because we have the paper next class. So next class, paper is due.